Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. The movie begins with two police detectives, Mason Danvers and Joel Gaynor, on the verge of apprehending a drug lord named Victor Abbott and his brother Griffin. Griffin, who was ready with his weapon when they ambushed the Abbott brothers, paralyzed Joel, and forced him to hide. Knowing this, Mason attempts to attack Griffin, resulting in a shootout. Mason then searches for Victor's whereabouts, after successfully paralyzing Griffin. Another shootout was unavoidable until they both ran out of ammunition, and got into a brawl. Victor manages to knock Mason down, and is on his way to murder him. But then Joel and the other cops arrive, and immediately arrest Victor and his brother. Victor tells Mason that he will see him soon before being sent to prison. Mason, who was at home with his wife Jocelyn, was seen shortly after the incident chatting about the pregnancy they had planned for a long time, but to no avail. Nonetheless, he always encourages and supports his wife to do her best. While at work, Mason is visited by one of his colleagues, who informs him that all of the witnesses used to imprison the Abbott brothers had mysteriously vanished. Not only that, but because there was no proof to support their case and no witnesses to corroborate it, they were compelled to immediately release Victor and Griffin Abbott. Mason immediately contacted his wife, after learning that Victor would be freed soon, because he was concerned about her safety. He recalls Victor's threat from a while ago, that he would come to see him, so he is frightened that Victor would come to see him. Unpredictably, Victor is the one who picked up the phone, not Jocelyn. Victor is already at his house, and is holding his wife as a prisoner. Mason hurriedly makes his way back to his home. While he is driving there, he gives Joel a call, and asks him to provide backup to his house. In the meantime, Victor murders Jocelyn without showing even the slightest bit of remorse. When Mason goes home, he finds out what has happened. The news leaves him in a state of utter devastation. He is on the verge of firing his gun at Victor at that moment. However, Joel does what he can to stop it, and Mason eventually gives up on Victor. Victor is taken into custody by Joel and the police. Even after some time has passed since the event, Mason still gives off the impression that he is agitated and depressed, as a direct result of the passing of his beloved wife. One day, Joel pays him a visit, and suggests that he take some time off to go on a trip or hunt, in order to get his thoughts organized. It appears that Mason is giving Joel's recommendation some thought. However, as it turns out, he did not go hunting for animals. Rather, in order to seek revenge for the loss of his wife, he goes searching for Griffin, Victor's brother. Mason, who is already aware of where Griffin is located, then notifies Joel, and urges his partner to accompany the police in their investigation of the incident. After contacting Joel, Mason heads straight inside to surprise Griffin, where he is waiting for him. Mason then shoots Griffin dead without stopping to think about it, while Joel and the police arrive at the scene. Mason is instantly caught by the police, due to the fact that he has purposely done it. He did this purposefully in order to be thrown into the same prison as Victor, in order to get revenge. In accordance with the plans, Mason is housed in the same institution as Victor Abbott. Mason is led to his cell within the correctional facility, by two wardens named Lester and Ben, who also act as guides. Will, a warden, comes to see Mason, while he is in the holding cell. Will tells Mason that the warden wants him to come to the warden's room. When Mason arrives at the warden's office, who is named Snyder, he tries to warn Mason that the majority of the prisoners in this prison are criminals who were caught by him. Therefore, he needs to be more careful, because the prisoners might take vengeance on him if he did anything wrong. But Mason is prepared for it, and he approaches it with caution. Mason finally runs into Victor, when they are both in the dining hall, and Victor criticizes Mason over the death of his wife. But Mason eventually strikes back, claiming that he has murdered Griffin in the same manner as Victor has murdered his wife. Mason isn't there for long before three other convicts approach him, while he is working in the prison laundry room, and they proceed to beat him up right away. Ben appears just as Mason is about to be pushed, and is no longer able to fight, since he has been battered. He swiftly separates all of them, so that Mason would not sustain a serious injury that can be deadly. Mason approaches Ben, who is standing guard over the prisoners the following day when they were out in the field. Ben is monitoring the prisoners at the time. He was a detective with the police department, before he was kicked out of school and eventually became a jail warden. He then tells Mason that his plan to get revenge on Victor by traveling to this prison is a terrible idea, because Victor is much more strong inside of it, and explains he will be unable to harm Victor. Since Victor has taken the lives of some of the toughest inmates in this facility, he is held in very high regard. Not only that, but while he is behind bars, Victor is actively expanding his drug operation with the assistance of two of his most reliable associates, namely Drexler and Booker. Ben then underlines that Victor is actually only the body of the snake, not the head of the snake, which suggests that there are others in prison, who are more influential in the drug industry than Victor. After a few days have passed, Joel pays Mason a visit to jail to check on how he is doing there. But then Mason asks Joel to verify the inmates who have lately been released, since he suspects that Victor Abbott conducts his drug operation in jail via them. Joel complies with Mason's request. Mason and Joel are completely unaware that Lester has overheard their chat, and has informed Snyder of what he has heard. When Mason gets back to his cell after that, he recalls the identities of his assailants in the laundry room, and they were none other than Victor's men, Marco Flynn and RB. As a form of retaliation for the activities of people who are planning to kill him, Mason fashions a weapon out of a pen that is straightforward yet deadly. Mason then begins a counterattack the following day, by stabbing Marco with his gun, which ultimately results in the man's death. After that, Mason goes to Flynn's location, where he is by himself, and kills Flynn by strangling him. RB goes straight to Victor after becoming aware that Mason is responsible for the deaths of two of his co-workers, and requests that Victor take action against Mason. Mason receives a warning from Drexler, as a result of an angry order from Victor. Drexler has someone break into Mason's cell and attack him. Mason, on the other hand, is successful in pummeling the man. Next, Mason is brought into Snyder's room, where Snyder makes an offer to Mason, which Mason categorically rejects. Snyder gives Will the instruction to place Mason in solitary confinement as a punishment. Drexler then goes to Victor, and requests that Mason be put to death as soon as possible, after learning that Mason has been successful in rendering his soldiers immobile. However, Victor advises them to hold off, because Snyder has not yet placed an order. After being released from his time in solitary confinement, Mason goes back to his cell, to exact his vengeance on RB, by soliciting the assistance of his other inmates. RB is out on his own at the time, and receives a phone call from his cellmate, who informs him that Victor is looking for him. However, when he arrives there, Mason is waiting for him, and he promptly beats him till he dies. Victor is not there to greet him when he arrives. Because Mason has already taken the lives of 3, Victor is unable to just remain silent, and goes to ask Snyder for permission to take Mason's life. Snyder first grants him permission. However, Snyder instantly denies Victor's plea, since Mason is a well-respected law enforcement officer in the force, and Snyder is concerned that Mason's death in jail will have a detrimental impact on his career as chief warden. He hands over a piece of paper to Victor with Joel Gaynor's name written on it, and instructs Victor to make Gaynor an instrument in his vendetta against Mason. Lester then makes contact with Joel, and informs him about the killing of Mason Danvers, manufactured to lure Joel into prison. This action is taken on the orders of Snyder. On the other hand, as soon as they get to the prison, Victor and his men begin severely beating Joel, and Mason is there to witness the torture. The following day, Mason goes to Snyder in his room, and proposes a business arrangement that would be mutually beneficial to both of them. Snyder tells Mason that he wants him to kill anyone who interferes with his business, because Mason, who is well versed in police procedures, is also a cold-blooded killer. But first, Mason makes a request of Snyder, who agrees immediately. Mason reportedly asks Snyder to assist him in the assassination of Booker, one of Victor's right-hand men. Knowing that Booker is no longer alive, Victor rushes into Snyder's office, and threatens to murder Mason right away. Recognizing that Victor will attack him while they are in the dining hall, Mason attacks one of the guards on purpose, in order to send him to solitary confinement, and thereby enrage Victor. Mason is placed in solitary confinement, when Ben approaches him and hands him a knife for self-defense. Snyder meets Mason in solitary confinement the next day to discuss their deal. Mason, on the other hand, states that they had no agreement from the start, and that he no longer requires Snyder. Snyder, enraged at Mason's betrayal, then abandons Mason, and appears to be plotting something. The following day, Snyder approaches Mason, and informs him that he will transfer him to another prison, so that he cannot exact revenge on Victor. Mason is informed after being released from solitary confinement, Snyder is arranging for an expedited transfer to another prison. Mason approaches Drexler, who is alone in Snyder's office, and beats him. Drexler's men arrive not long after and surround Mason. Mason easily defeats them. He then drags Drexler onto the prison roof, and throws him on top of Will, who is on guard, killing both. The prisoners listed below steal Will's gun, and trasha the prison grounds. In the midst of the chaos, Victor attempts to shoot Mason, but the bullet instead hits another prisoner. Mason then makes Victor fight with only his bare hands. Snyder arrives and shoots Mason in the shoulder, knocking him down. Snyder then hands over his gun to Victor, allowing him to immediately kill Mason. However, Mason later tells Victor that it was Snyder who assisted him in killing Booker. Hearing this, Victor becomes enraged, and breaks Snyder's knee, causing him to fall to the ground. The guards try to stop Victor, as he is about to kill Snyder. Mason is attacked by other prisoners after successfully regaining his footing. However, Lester then points a gun at Mason, which he easily grabs and shoots the warden. Victor, who has used his strength to defeat the guards, approaches Mason, and the two engage in another fierce battle. Just as Victor is about to kill him, Mason takes the knife Ben had given him, and slits Victor's throat, killing him instantly. Snyder attempts to murder Mason. But Ben paralyzes him, and Snyder is eventually convicted of all acts of fraud and violation of the law committed during his tenure as chief warden of the prison. The moral of the movie is that hatred and vengeance bring misery to everyone, not just the target of vengeance, but also the person who carried out the vengeance. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Turn on the notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out.